In Neville Goddard's The Feeling is the Secret, he talks about how feeling the feeling of having something is the way to manifest it. That is 100% true, but I'm sure most of you watching have tried it and found that it's not always that simple. That hard as we try to feel as though something is true, it feels like we're gaslighting ourselves sometimes. And it's very difficult to remain in the feeling state that something is true. And this is evidenced by the thousands of videos that are out there on the topic. It's like you have to hear it over and over and over again. You have to put all this effort into feeling something that you have not yet experienced. So, this video is all about how to get to a place where you can trust enough to allow yourself to feel an end state without threatening the ego part of yourself, the part of you that still has the limiting beliefs, that still finds it hard to believe. A lot of times, and I talk about this in some of my other videos, the ego self is protecting something. Our ego, our limiting beliefs are not enemies. They actually are there to support us, and they will fight to the death to continue to serve their purpose in our experience, right? So part of us being able to come here and identify as Samara or whoever you are is that we build this ego self. We build all these parameters. We create this code that allows us to have this experience as a unique individual versus the God self, which is connected to all. And literally, when we challenge that code and that programming, it feels like a death because it is a death. It's an ego death. And if the ego dies, we've got to cut the game off and exit. So the beliefs that we hold that allow us to be who we are, allow us to have a perception of the past and the future in order to exist in this moment, are very, very important. And when we come into this experience, we have that base code, right? We make a choice about who we want to be in this particular lifetime. And when we get here, that gets added on to. More programming happens for the first 7 years of life through our parents, through our exposure to different things. And before we know it, we've got pages and pages and pages of code dictating our experience and what we perceive with our conscious mind. Our subconscious mind is still very much connected to source and to the all, and it has access to all the information, all the inputs we would ever take in, millions and millions of pieces of information per second. But this conscious mind filters through all of that based on the coding that we put in place and that, our parents help put in place, society helps us put in place, and it filters it down to our current experience. So the reason why sometimes it can be difficult to feel that something is real to you, to enter into the state of having it, is because all the programming that you have is telling you something different. How do we overcome that? I have another video about how we examine that code and remove the code that doesn't serve us. But in this video, I want to tell you how to trust enough to let yourself feel that feeling. It requires a basic understanding of your makeup. You are a 3D, 4D being, right? But you also exist in all the other dimensions. You also still, even though your ego self tells you so that you can survive this reality that you don't, you still do have access to the all, the God part of yourself. And so if you can understand that you're having a 3D, 4D experience and that the programming that you received is meant to serve you, but you have full access to change it, and that the way that you communicate with the parts of yourself, the higher self, they call it. I don't like the term higher because it makes it seem like this is somehow beneath or less than. But for lack of a better term, the way that you communicate with your higher self is through expressing a feeling. So you communicate a desire not through words, but through how you feel when you use words, or just how you feel, period. When you think of it that way, when you think of it as not as gaslighting yourself and lying to yourself and fighting your true beliefs about a situation. And you think about it as a simple communication to the higher self to bring clarity to the higher self about what it is that you want to bring into your reality, then it becomes safe to allow yourself to feel that something is true, even though you have not experienced it in the 3D, 4D. So, what's an example of this, right? Let's say you want to manifest $6 million. You wrote yourself a check for $6 million from the universe and you're trying to bring it in. You may have a ton of limiting beliefs that say, you got to win the lottery to get $6 million. Or, people with that much money are just bad people. It's going to corrupt you. You could have any number of limiting beliefs that, when you think about the possibility of having the $6 million, interfere with your ability to feel it fully. It doesn't feel safe because you feel that either you don't deserve it, it's not possible. It disturbs your ego self to think about the possibility of having $6 million for whatever reason. But if you say to yourself, I'm trying to get a message to the part of me that is beyond the 4D, and I know the language of that part of me is feeling, let me just step into it so I can get the message to my higher self about what I desire. Then all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so unsafe. It's kind of like I'm not actually, subjecting myself to the new reality. I'm just trying to imagine what it would feel like so I can get the message to my higher self so that it can guide me through excitement, through whatever means, to this desired result. Then all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so dangerous, because if you try to force past your limiting beliefs, you trigger them. They're there for a reason. They're there to hold together you in this reality. And if you threaten them, if you go against them, if you suddenly say to yourself, well, I've held this belief that people with money are evil. Will I become evil? And then the fear starts to build up and that belief starts fighting for its life. And you step into fear. But if you say, oh, no, limiting belief, I'm not threatening you. You're safe. I'm just trying to talk to my higher self real quick. Then you can let yourself freely imagine what it would be like to have the $6 million and maybe even be the salt of the earth, kindest person ever while you have it. So you can leave the limiting belief where it is for now. You got to come back to it eventually. You eventually have to do the shadow work. But if you want to be able to get into that feeling state without threatening that limiting belief and making it fight for its life and generate fear in you so that it can stay alive and preserve your ego, then you just think of it as sending a message to your higher self. And in doing that, sometimes just the act of allowing yourself to imagine what it would be like to be wealthy and kind and generous will help dissolve the limiting belief, will help remove the fear that the limiting belief is generating in you just by simply allowing yourself to challenge it through experiencing the feeling of the limiting belief not being true. Same thing with relationships. If you have negative beliefs about the opposite sex and you find it so challenging to imagine yourself being safe in a loving relationship, then you've got to talk to that limiting belief and say, hey, you're good. I'm not threatening you right now. I'm just, taking a little journey. I'm just communicating with my higher self. I'm just allowing myself to imagine something really quickly. It's not even real. You don't even have to tell yourself that it's real. You just have to allow yourself to get into the feeling state, because that is what your higher self is going to interpret and figure out how to bring to you. So even if you believe that all men are liars, even if you believe that all women are disloyal, you can just say, okay, fine. No worries, limiting belief. But I'm going to take a little time. It's very safe here in the inside of my head. I'm just going to imagine what it would be like if that weren't true. I'm going to imagine what it would be like if my partner was incredibly loyal and kind, and you could even imagine a full lifetime with that person. and just let yourself do it. You can tell the limiting belief, no harm. You're safe. This is just a temporary experience I'm having. And like I said, just the act of allowing yourself to imagine something can start to dissolve the limiting belief. So I talked about in my other video how to just shine light on the limiting belief, challenge it a little bit to dissolve it and remove it from your coding. Another fun way to do that is what I'm talking about here, which is allowing yourself to get into the feeling state without threatening the limiting belief, but then the act of being in the feeling state itself, letting yourself get past that fear when that limiting belief is screaming at you and making it feel really difficult to get yourself into a feeling state. Calming that limiting belief down, getting into that feeling state can start to dissolve the limiting belief. There's a lot of ways to do it. So next time you feel like you're having trouble with this, try this method. If the method still doesn't work, just spend a little time reflecting and questioning yourself. If, for example, here's another example. You think corporate is evil, but you haven't figured out a way to earn money on your own. So you want to know the feeling of having a job that you love, even though everything, all the content you consume calls corporate this evil giant. What if, as you try to imagine yourself in a position that you actually love at a corporation that's actually making a difference in the world, and you find it hard because you're like, that just doesn't make sense. Capitalism doesn't make sense. Corporate greed doesn't make sense. Then you can ask yourself, is there any reason why that might not be true? Because truth be told, every time we go to a grocery store and we didn't have to farm for our vegetables ourselves, there's some benefit to that. Like, just use both things. Use both the shadow work and directly shining light on limiting beliefs and the desire to get into your feeling state to begin to dissolve them. Because truth be told, we are creating reality. So yes, we can see examples of the same things over and over and over again. And we can, for that reason, convince ourselves that the chicken came before the egg, or the egg came before the chicken, however you want to say it. But it could just be our programming causing us to filter out the other millions of inputs and focus in on these inputs. We are literally projecting our reality outward. Reality is not something we're taking in. It's something we're projecting outward. And so, yes, you could have seen examples of the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and still have the opportunity to create something new. You would be surprised. And it's so hard to overcome because the ego self, the beliefs that we're programmed with, fight for their lives, because literally they're what's keeping the ego alive. They're what's keeping the ability for you to have a human experience going. And so it is hard for them to let go of that structure that they've created to build your ego self, to allow you to exist in the present moment. But once you challenge that, you would be amazed at what you can open yourself up to. You could literally, by succumbing to your limiting beliefs, have a singular experience your entire life and die with that experience. And it won't be till you get to the other side and reconnect with the all that you're like, I never did see it. It's kind of like playing that video game and never finding like the cheat code or the secret thing that people look for. I don't know much about video games, if you can't tell. But you could literally live your life seeing the same thing over and over and over again until you die. But you could also choose to gently dissolve a limiting belief and experience an entirely new reality. It's very hard to explain this to someone that has not experienced it. But by being open to transformation and challenging my limiting beliefs, I have seen things that I would have never thought possible. And it's not like I'm seeking these things or these new experiences. I'm really just letting go of the idea that they're not possible. Like, I'm really just letting go of whatever my idea is. Like, I once believed that the world is poisoning us, right? Especially in the US. And I had this perspective that they're intentionally killing us, right? Then I kind of let go of that belief. I at least took my power back and said, okay, even if that's true, there are ways to have vibrant health, right? And so just releasing, just challenging that belief just a little bit led me to an experience where I met in person, shook hands with a doctor, one of the many doctors that has come up with a cure for cancer, that has treated people and cured their cancer in a medical setting. A lot of people haven't experienced that. And I believe that the reason why I was able to experience that is because I let go of my limiting belief. So when you release limiting beliefs, you reopen your access to all these different possibilities. And the part of you that exists in the higher dimensions can then bring you something new, something that you may not have even expected. I didn't say to myself that cancer is curable. What I said was, even if society is intentionally trying to poison people, there are ways around it. I can still take control of my health. And as a result of that, I experienced speaking with a doctor that worked on a cure for cancer. And I've had many experiences similar to that where I just removed the limitations from my own conscious mind, and things came in that nobody I know has ever experienced, and that completely blew my mind. So because of the work that I did to address limiting beliefs, I've been able to have incredible experiences in my life. I've been able to stand at Land's End in Cabo because I went once before and just had the fleeting thought and feeling, completely immersed myself in the feeling of being in paradise. And I got to experience it. So, it's safe. What it really boils down to is that a lot of us, because of our limiting beliefs that are protecting us, protecting the ego self, we don't feel safe allowing ourselves to be in the feeling state, be in the end state emotionally. But when we remember that we're connected to the all, that this experience is something that we're creating and projecting outward, then even if the limiting beliefs haven't dissolved, we can feel safe enough to just let ourselves indulge in the feeling of the desire fulfilled.